Well, good morning, everyone. Happy week 3. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and that you got some much needed rest and that the start of your work week is going well. So, this week we are talking about motivation. And motivation is always a very interesting topic in education. It's an interesting topic everywhere. So, the first thing that I want you to do today as you are watching this video is I want you to pause for a minute. You can even pause me for a minute. And I want you to think about the things that motivate you right now in your life. What things motivate you to do chores, to eat well, to work well, to navigate relationships? Think about things that motivate you. Then I want you to think about what motivates you to study in the MyEd program, what motivates you to move forward in the MyEd program. And then take a moment and think about when you were a younger student, what motivated you. And it's different from everyone. And that's where, brain-based research comes in for my students that had me last time. You know a lot about motivation with brain-based. For those of you that had other professors, and if you've taken brain-based, then you know a lot about what motivates people based on brain-based research. And a couple of the things that we need to remember as educators is that once again we have to build community in our classrooms. That's number one. Building community, getting to know your clientele, your students, is what helps you figure out what motivates a student, what motivates them to move forward. And when we're dealing with kids, we have to remember that the development of their brain, their motivation can turn on or off, hot or cold, with just one interaction. And sometimes we can't get it back. So we have to really consider those things when we're teaching. One of my big motivators that I like to use is that I like to be humorous. I like to use humor. And I like to build my relationships, with my students in humorous ways. And I always stand out on my porch in the morning and tease the high schoolers as they come in a nice way. But, I know them all by name. I'll see them off at a distance and I'll be like, Fred, come on, the bells, you're going to not make it. I'll pretend that I'm going to close the door, things like that, that just put them in the mood to want to be engaged with me. And I find that when I don't do those things, when I'm not as present with the students, well, then I've set the tone. So I think that that's very important, that you have to consider what you're going to use to bring students in, no matter what the age, and what you're going to use to set the tone, because that's going to direct the motivation for the day. Once I have students in my classroom, I usually start the class with a story. They always love stories. All kids love stories, no matter what age. They always love stories, short stories or something fun, or something like that, uh, and to just get them comfortable being in class. Allison, in the discussion board, you were talking about getting ninth graders, getting them to read was like pulling teeth. And I was thinking about that because, we have to find ways to pull them into the material. And so sometimes when the material's really dry, you have to consider, and this comes back to your curriculum design, okay? You have to consider what's something related to this that I might be able to pull in and tell a story about, or, hit them with, that they're going to be like, wow, I didn't know that. That really pulls them into learning a little bit more about something that may possibly be quite dry, especially when you're getting up into the older grades where they're doing AP and econ and American history and those types of things, science, that can be quite dry sometimes. Doesn't mean we don't love them, but they can be dry sometimes. And reading classic literature can be dry sometimes as well. So, Allison, when I had my seniors come back this year, after the pandemic, so many of them had never read the book The Outsiders. Never. First, it had been taken from high school down to lower grades, which I never understood because it's such an intense book. It's an easy reading level, but the subjects in that book are quite intense and work really well with older students. And that's something that motivates them. That's something that motivates them. So it's finding the things within something that will motivate them. Okay. So building interest, using humor, telling stories, building that community to bring them in and make them want to learn. Then you have to decide, and Jennifer was talking about this in the discussion board as well. You have to decide what activities are you going to do to help with that motivation. And so for me, and I'm just using myself as an example in this motivation. Uh, I knew that the students had really gotten out of the habit of reading during the pandemic, reading actual books in their hands. Everybody's scanning. Everybody's on their phone. And even I have talked about that before in other classes. That it's more difficult for me. I still love to read, but it's more difficult for me to get in it if I've been scanning a lot. So for me, I knew that I was going to have to make a serious commitment uh, to bring that motivation back. And so I decided that I was going to read that book out loud to every class, and that I was going to do all the voices, and I was going to act it out. That I was going to be this performer, and we were going to do a chapter each class, and I was going to perform it. And so that really pulled them in. And there were several reasons why I did that. One, I didn't sit at my desk and have an audio tape on. There's nothing wrong with that. There's definitely objectives about speaking and listening, and standards that we can use to do that. But if I'm not fully engaged, then they are probably not going to be fully engaged. So I decided, one, I was going to commit to show them how important reading was to me, how important I felt this book was to me. Then I talked about reading it when I was younger. I talked about the book and how it mattered to me as an artist and how it mattered to me as a student. And then of course, all of the boys that were in that film. Hang on 1 second. There's something in my window. There we go. All of the boys that were in that film, when I was growing up, we were all crazy for them. Rob Lowe and Tom Cruise and Patrick Swayze. And so I showed them, a picture of all of them, and the whole class was like, "Oh." And naming all the movie stars, and those types of things. And so that was the first thing that I did. I wanted them to see that I was still highly engaged. I was still highly attached. I was still motivated by this book, by this writer, that I loved that it was written by a woman that used her initials, Sue Hinton, S.E. Hinton, because publishers at that time thought that boys would not read books about boys if it was written by a girl. So that immediately brings in the topic of diversity, which is very interesting to students and to educators at this time. And then I used proximity. And that's something that I can't, say enough. Use your proximity, move around your room. So I was able to move around the room and gently correct people as needed. Not, harshly correct people, gently correct people. Sometimes just standing by somebody helps them, motivates them to get back on track if they get off. And then once they start getting into it again, they're fine, because they need that help getting back into scanning, reading after scanning. And then, I would stop at key points and, we would just have a conversation throughout. And when we were done reading the chapter, each chapter I would set up to something that I felt was relevant to what they knew today, related to social media, current events. We looked at good girl, bad girl biases of the 1950s. We looked at Ponyboy and PTSD. We looked at Johnny and PTSD. We looked at Dally and PTSD. We looked at social class and the socials, the haves and the have-nots. We looked at absentee characters in the book, mainly women. And we looked at music because in the book, the certain people liked Hank Williams and certain people liked Elvis, like the Greasers, liked Elvis. So then we talked about that. And I showed music clips. And I showed a couple clips from Grease. Look at me, I'm Sandra Dee, the good girl, bad girl thing. I showed them women during that time period, famous singers and movie stars that were considered good girls or bad girls in that time period. And so I used their pop culture to bring them in and motivate them. So those are all great things that you can do in the class. You can find, what they're interested in and bring it in. You can show them how valuable something is that you're teaching them by being engaged, by being involved in it. You can motivate them by proximity, being close, but not in a threatening way, just in a firm, facilitating way. And so all of those things can help using humor, building community, greeting them when they come in, all of those things that you're already probably doing in your classes. And then the other thing that you have to find out when you're related to thinking about motivation is you have to think about what motivates them based on their home life, based on their personal experiences. So, I always make sure that I know my clientele, my students, who's involved in sports, which sport are they involved in, who's involved in music, what instrument do they play, or do they sing, who's in dance, who's in art. And I make sure that when I'm crafting the curriculum, my English curriculum, that I hit all of their interests within my curriculum that I've designed. And it sounds sometimes like it can be difficult, but it's not, because you spend time crafting and reassessing over the course of the year, and then you're ready for the next year and you add things in. That's part of being a great teacher. That's part of being a great educator, is that you allow your curriculum, you have the base of your curriculum, but then you fluidly take things in and out that better suit your clientele as you move forward. And so, those things, knowing your students, knowing their likes, their dislikes, knowing what is valued in their home is all helps you to motivate a student to really stay with you in class. Now, the last one's the hardest one that I want to bring. When you're having your worst day, when you're having your absolute worst day, and you snap or you snark or you say something kind of, sassy, we all do it. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody has tone sometimes. But when you feel like you're going to have that moment of tone, try to find a way to step back. Try to find a way to step back. You can always say, well, that's an interesting thought. Let me think about that. Or you can choose not to comment at all. Or, you can do something else if you're feeling frustrated for a minute. Walk over to your desk, have a sip of water, shuffle some papers before you respond. Because unfortunately with kids, because of the way their brains are, because they're so black and white, with their thinking, their hypothalamus is not, completely developed yet, so they make these split second decisions. It's easy for them to get off task. It's easy for them to make you know pull out a phone at the wrong time or talk to somebody, an impulse, thing. And if you snap or you sauce, you can sometimes have kids that shut down and you won't get them back. You just won't get them back. And I've seen that before. I had a friend who one time was, being a bit sarcastic with a student. Thought he could be, has a joking tone, and thought he could be. And that student came to my room later, and I overheard, it was lunchtime, and I overheard the student talking to other students about the incident. And then the student said, "I don't care what that man says. I'm never listening to him ever again." And it all changed within a second. And it wasn't even like a big thing. But it was a big thing to the student. And sometimes they'll choose war. So you want to make sure that you reel it back in. And another great thing that you can do, and it's not always easy, but this is where you have to take ego out of the equation. You have to show them how you recover after you make a mistake. You have to be willing to apologize when you have made a mistake. And they need to see adults recover and behave appropriately and apologize when they need to apologize. You can't say, "I'm sorry, but I was having a bad day," or "I'm sorry, but we had a meeting." There's no but. It's just, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I did that. I'm going to try to do better next time." And we're not above doing that. And when you do those things, what happens is students see that you are willing to be honest, you are willing to be vulnerable, you are willing to be connected, and therefore they are motivated to be present for you. So lots of things to think about related to motivation, and remember, always remember why you got into the profession, because you value higher learning, and you want to motivate students to love that joy of learning, whether it's pre-K, whether it's 12th grade, and anywhere in between. So I want you to have a wonderful week. Make sure that you do your discussion boards. You have one that's a graded discussion board, and then you have one that's non-required. If you're looking at your Blackboard right now, I'm just going to pull up week 3 for you so I can just give you a quick overview before I finish up. Your Blackboard discussion is related to the videos on motivation. I'm really interested in what you have to say about motivation. And then remember your discussion board number 2, that's the non-graded one. And that's where you're going to go ahead and put your group's collaborative presentations so that we can share those with all of the cohort. And then you are going to make sure that you submit your collaborative group presentation, which is due on or before 11:59 p.m. Sorry, stuttering today, week 3. Okay. And week 3 started yesterday, although we had the holiday. And so just make sure that you're in touch with your group members and that you're doing everything you need to do. And I wish you well and have a good week. And I will be grading today and tomorrow, so everything should be updated by Thursday. Take care. Bye bye.